Hey, Cubs fans, and welcome to a brand new edition of Cubs on Tap. I am Ron Luce, joined by the Juice Man himself, and we'll have the one and only Mr. Joey Ricotta hopefully joining us here very shortly. But Juice Man, to start things off, first off, how you doing? We have some personal exciting plans coming this week that I'm very much looking forward to, and it actually involves Cubs baseball. So I wanna know how you're feeling on this Monday that has a lot more anticipation than a usual Monday.
Well, on the last podcast, I said everybody wants to talk to the guy with the bucket hat. I think that was the last one, or was the one before. So I went deep into my closet, found the bucket hat. Yeah, man, I'm excited. It's a great week. We got regular season kicking off for baseball. It's Masters because, as you know, I'm a huge golf guy.
Big
bunch
golf
of
guy.
buzz out there about Tiger Woods, and if he's going to play, it'll be a hell of a week for TV. And for games with national championship tonight, it's a good week for sports. So I think I talk with my best friends and I talk about this week as like one of the best weeks for sports because I love college basketball. I love the Masters, and baseball starting's great. You got the stretch run for the NBA playoffs. I know hockey's kind of in the stretch run too.
Yeah,
man, like it's hard. If there were only football, this would be like the greatest week in the history of sports.
I think that's why October Forever Reigns is the greatest like month of sports because it's kind of the flip side of that, right? You got baseball ending in its playoffs, but then it's like the hype of the NFL, NHL, NBA seasons, like all the other big sports, like there's still significant golf outings happening. College football's back in swing. Like it's a beautiful month of sports. That's why I always love October. Even though it's kind of the cooler weather in Chicago, it's like, but it's such a great time of year. It's magical. But nonetheless, we are talking about the flip side of that, right? It is April. Baseball is starting this week. Opening day, Thursday. That's what this episode is all about. It's season predictions, thoughts that we have about the upcoming season, all that kind of fun stuff. So it's going to be a little bit of a longer show. But we're going to make sure it stays entertaining and keeps going. But just a little bit of news, right? There's some news in the cycle. The Cubs are standing pat. I saw a report today that Bruce Levine said on Twitter that with the kind of cuts coming up now, Cubs are probably a team to keep an eye on. If a pretty significant guy that they kind of like gets cut, they're probably taking a waiver claim on him and bringing him on to the 40 man. So certainly going to be something interesting to keep an eye on this season. We learned a little bit about some of the minor league assignments, and we'll touch on that here in a minute too. And then we'll talk about a guy that we've talked about pretty significantly on the pod. That was a cool story today before we dive into our season preview stuff. But for starters, Juice, I'm intrigued to see if the Cubs actually do something significant ahead of opening day.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see who gets cut, who's available. I think if you're a Cub fan, you're kind of hoping for some extra starting pitching depth, if there's any that's going to hit there, because it seems like the league is going to hold just really tightly to any starting pitchers that they have on their roster, considering that we've already seen a good amount of injuries around the league and some big names too. You're looking at the South Side too. They got two guys that, a starter and a reliever that was, going to be, mainstays in their bullpen and front of the line starter.
A guy that Yasmani Grandal said he's one of those dudes that people talk about around the league as a relief pitcher.
Yeah, and that's,
big.
I have a prediction for later for the league of as we're going to go through what we think is going to happen, and that kind of ties into it. But just to kind of look at the Cubs' perspective, if you can bring in arms, I think they will.
Yeah.
And I think that they'll look for depth pieces around the outfield too. I know we've talked about the outfield having so much, but I do think that you can never not have enough utility guys that can play around the field, play both infield and outfield. And I think, they'll be definitely looking at that scrap heap. And if there's one thing that the Cubs have kind of, cemented themselves since the beginning of the Theo Epstein era, it's the fact that they've been pretty good at choosing guys off of that. I mean, they've had some hits. I mean, going all the way back to Trevor Cahill and,
Paul Maholm.
I mean, they had guys who came in and had some huge successes for them. Yeah. And I think that it'll be interesting to see like teams like the Reds, who have cut payroll a lot this year, who do they, walk away from? And I do think that like teams like the Padres who are up against the cap, what are they willing to let loose?
Yeah,
And
that's a
I
good
think
point.
it'll be interesting to see the trade market too, because we may get to the end of this and it may spark some rumors because there's some holes that guys have to fill. And I mean, much like the South Side we saw, the Kimbrel trade for Pollock, it'll be two teams that are in need of one kind of swapping, needs. And I think we may see more movement within the league this year in terms of trades because of that. It'd be interesting to see that scrap heap and who's available. And I think the Cubs, if you're a Cub fan, you feel pretty confident with who they're going to bring in because they've been pretty good at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, like you said, we see that time and time again. Ryan Tepera was a little bit of that kind of project,
Yep.
right? Like he was a known reliever, but didn't have a ton of huge success. Cubs liked what they saw in him, brought him in, worked him in that pitch lab. That again is going to be something that starts to make the Cubs stand out going forward. It's only going to make them more and more appealing as this team actually becomes good as well. You throw all those factors into it, the Cubs are absolutely the team. Like, look at some of these guys that have pitched for them this spring training. Who would have thought Jesse Chavez still had enough in him to be an effective pitcher? He just went 3 innings the other day of like 4 hits, 1 walk, like 5 strikeout ball. Like, what? Jesse Chavez of all people, like these are all guys that benefit from that pitching lab. So I absolutely agree with you, Juice. I think arms that they see any level of potential in, they're bringing them in to work in that pitching lab and make something happen. If they can hit on a couple of them, and even if they're guys they turn around, they flip at the deadline. Like, who's not to say that they can't go and actually make a big splash? And Juice, I agree with you. And I think we might see, like you said, like a guy that can come in and maybe be a utility guy, kind of move around in the middle infield, I think is really what they're looking for, right? We saw them make the trade earlier in the offseason that sent Harold Ramirez out of town, down to Tampa to bring in the little 5'6" lefty guy. Like, I mean, they've made some, because he's a middle infielder with potential. Like,
right.
They're going to just take shots at guys. They have the ability to be flexible, and I'm so excited to see how that works. Like you said, really, like in the next 24 hours. Like, is this going to be another kind of like rush again, like we got? Right, we had the pre December 1 like amp up, and then it was quiet. And then like it ramped back up again when baseball came back, and then it went quiet. Like, are we going to see one last little bit before like it's opening day and teams aren't making as big of moves until probably the trade deadline again?
I think that with the new CBA negotiations as well, it kind of makes it more like, hey, go for it, right? It seems to only kind of promote more player movement, in my opinion. I hope that's the case because I always looked at baseball as how exciting the trade deadline always was. And if we could have
I
that
love the trade deadline
for a span of a week, at the beginning of the season, how cool would that be to like in baseball isn't like football where you have to learn a playbook or basketball where it's a lot of communication and playing, get to knowing your teammates where they like to have the basketball or whatever. Baseball is baseball. You know what I mean? It's
right.
like you go out there, you play.
Yeah.
And I hope that's the case. I just wonder too, though, on the flip side of that, if because there's so much doubt in the starting pitching market and with all these arms, does that kind of halter that back where we don't see as many people getting cut and we don't see,
or maybe we see teams giving up on more significant bats. Yes. I think that's totally what could happen.
So maybe the market for a utility guy makes more sense for us to sit here and talk about that opposed to arms, because I think arms, while they're already at a premium, will be even more at a premium because of the short spring training, because of the the short ramp up. It's the interesting thing for all of this for this year. I think you're really going to see who put in the time in the offseason when they didn't have a deal done, right?
Yeah.
Those guys who went to the weight room or through to their, high school coaches or whatever.
Right.
Like, you're really going to see if you were just sitting around or if you were, getting ready for the season.
Right.
And there may be a bunch of guys who fall flat on their face this year because they didn't think that they would have a season based on no negotiations for a month.
You're right.
And kind of just hitting them out of the blue, like, oh, I guess we are playing baseball. Because it's what seems like that for fans, right? I mean, we thought that, there's a lot of us who were sitting a week before that, like, we're not getting baseball. And then out of nowhere, it's like, oh, well, they're like 80% done with the deal. It's like, oh, wait, what? Really?
Yeah,
like,
it moved really
you guys
fast. You
guys were that close, like, so it'd be interesting to see like where that falls, and it'd be interesting to see which players fall in the aspect of, yeah, I prepared myself, or hey, I didn't prepare myself and I fell flat on my face for my team.
Yeah, that's a huge point too, right? Like we kind of see that with some of these guys, right? That even like sign late because like they weren't working as hard as you need to in like an MLB spring training. We saw that with Keuchel a couple of years ago with the Braves, and we saw that with Kimbrel when signing with the Cubs. Like if you don't have the proper preparation, I feel like especially as a pitcher, right? Hitters, it's a little easier just to kind of come in and boom, you hit. Because like think about it, hitters are in spring training for what, 4.5 weeks roughly, and they still got like almost 4.
Yep.
Pitchers are in there for 6 weeks and they got like 3.5, 4. So like that's where the biggest discrepancy is in like season preparation to me, is in that pitching. And I think that's why pitching is going to be the most important thing this season, especially for the first 3 months of the year. And that's why, like we talked about it earlier on in this offseason, but Juice, to rehammer home as a quick point, Adbert Alzolay is missing out. Like this is where Adbert Alzolay would thrive, coming out of the pen potentially as like that like gap guy from the 4th to the 6th inning, and it gets you to your back 3 in the pen and can preserve a lead. He did really well in that role late in the season for the Cubs last year. He would have been perfect for this right now. Like this also shows just why injuries are going to suck, because it's like, this is the perfect time when if you have too many arms, you'd be able to audition everybody, find out who's truly worth your time and worth keeping, and then keep it moving. Because of this delay, now instead, so many guys are also getting hurt now. It almost feels like these are the guys maybe that didn't prepare as much, or maybe they over prepared. Like, who knows?
And to build on that, Ron, if you over prepared during the offseason and there was a lockout, you are not allowed to see the Cubs medical staff.
Right.
So you're going to Joe Schmo
too.
You're going to Joe Schmo's doctor that everybody else goes to, and who knows how much they know. I mean, that's, and I'm not like, poo-pooing the doctors that we go to, but
I'm just saying,
like, I'm just saying, like, when you're a baseball medical trainer, like you go to school to learn that muscle, like that's the. So, like, for Adbert, I've tied it in the whole offseason. I don't know if I mentioned it on this podcast, but I have with text with my friends. I truly believe Adbert was hurt all offseason, was unable to get treatment from the Cubs medical staff because of the lockout. He comes back, he throws a couple pitches, and boom, he's hurt. Right. So that's what I think we're kind of looking at. I think there's a lot of guys out there who were that way too, that are maybe, going to fall off real early because they don't know that they're that hurt, or they think it's just, something that they're working through. Because that's another thing. When you're prepping for a season, you could definitely mistake some pain for rust.
Yeah.
When you're out there gearing up for the season, you 100%. Get 2 starts in and you're like, shit, this isn't going away.
Right.
So there may be some early diagnosis of some arms that are out there right now that we don't know, that they're hurt and they're hurting, but they're trying to gut it out and make it go away and brush it off as rust. But that's not the case. They're finally getting to see these medical teams again.
Yeah. No, and I think that's such a good point, and it kind of transitions us a little bit into our next point of news, Juice, and that's kind of like the hardcore movement in the Cubs farm system in a good way. Like a lot of guys are overly aggressively, probably compared to what most people thought, right? Obviously, the Cubs have the best idea of their guys, but like to the general public, I don't think a lot of people projected Ed Howard to be a A+ ball this year. Nobody predicted Killian to be in AAA to start the year. Everybody knew Brennan was going to be in AAA, but he was like the only one. And like they have over aggressively reassigned some guys. Owen Casey's at South Bend already.
Yeah.
After a big year last year, we're already going to see James Triantos in low A ball down in Myrtle Beach. Who else is in high A? Jordan Wicks is still in high A, but like I feel like he's a fringe guy where if he has a hot start in high A ball, maybe he does what Killian did last year and makes the quick jump to double A like early in the season and gets a full year at double A. Maybe we see Wicks in 2023. Who knows? Like, it just feels like the Cubs are so much better prepared a little bit this season too, right? Because some of these guys are a little further along than what people thought. Baseball in general has kind of lost sight of how far along and not far along some of these prospects are because of the weird seasons. Now everybody's like, oh, shit, okay. Like, Killian was like the 16th ranked prospect in the Cubs system at the end of last season. He's now number 4. Triantos is now number 3. Like, there are some guys that have shot up the ranks fast. And it's kind of exciting. And I think this is why the Cubs being as good as you mentioned, Juice, with the pitching aspect of things, right? That's also why you saw them load up on so many pitchers in the offseason. These no-name guys on like free agent, minor league contracts is to have them for depth this year that they can bring in, develop in that pitch lab, and then somehow use as a relief guy if you need to stock your bullpen. And a guy that we're going to talk about here in a little bit is kind of one of those guys. Granted, homegrown product in this essence, but like still same concept. He's young. He's probably ahead of where most people thought he might be. That's a testament to this organization and how well they're able to develop the side of pitching. So, Juice, quick thoughts on some of these reassignments, maybe a most surprising one to you. And I mean, dude, I think you see the correlation here, why I'm trying to bridge our conversation to the next point, because I really think this might be, and this is not my, this will be one of my 2, but I'll save my other league-wide prediction. This is good. There's going to be like a record set of pitchers used in a season across the league, because of the amount of injuries and like just guys having up and down years that we're going to see. It's going to be wild. We're eventually going to get to the point where the joke of, we talked about it, the friggin' movie. Help me, Juice. I'm drawing a blank.
From Moneyball?
No, not Moneyball.
From Major League?
Yes.
Who the hell are these guys?
League. Yeah. I couldn't remember that movie. I almost was like, it's Charlie Sheen. Like, I know the movie I'm talking about. Yep. Wild Thing. Oh my goodness. It's been a long Monday for me. You can tell I'm in vacation mode already, and we'll touch on that here in a while.
And I am too. I'm just trying to figure out which way this logo goes while I look in the
just whatever you're feeling, man.
No, but I agree with you. I think the interesting thing to me is and I'm a little slighted because I feel like I got slighted by Caleb Killian, because he wasn't here and really I didn't have much time to see him in South Bend.
Oh, he's so sick.
So I'm almost like, I feel bad because I won't be able to be there, but I understand that like South Bend's stacked. If you really look up and down that roster, there's a reason to go every day to watch that. So if you live around the ballpark, like go for $4, $5, whatever, it's awesome over there.
I'll be making a trip, Juice.
I'm interested. I'm interested for Killian. I am, because I think that it speaks volumes to them of how far along he is in their eyes, to the point where if he's at AAA and he's dealing, we may see him get a start in the second half of the season.
1,000%.
And that will be, sign me up. I will be in the bleachers watching that. I will have a ticket. I don't care what it costs, because I think, and this kind of ties it all together for what we're going to watch for this year.
Mm-hmm.
Watch all these guys like Ethan Roberts, we're going to talk about him, is the start, right? This is the beginning of learn his name, right? Like learn what he's about. Watch his interviews, things that he's excited about and making the team and all that, because it's like step 1 of learning the next Cubs team, right? And I'm not going to like put that on his back already, but it's interesting to see these guys come up and over the span of this year, because of injuries. I think that guys are going to get opportunities to move through the major league system quicker than they would, because Absolutely. You're going to need arms, like you said. And I think it's interesting to see too that the Cubs kind of have in the outfield some depth that if they want to move at the deadline, like in a hypothetical world, let's say that they're contending but really not contending, they could move and have guys come up and get at bats at the major league level
100%.
Late in the year, like Owen Casey. They absolutely
that would be
could.
Wild.
Absolutely
be
could, though.
wild.
Think about it.
Yeah.
When
No, you're right.
rosters expand,
You're totally
why
right.
not?
Yeah.
Because there's no knock to doing it anymore.
Right.
It's almost like you're kind of behind the eight ball if you don't see what they can do. It'll be interesting. Do I think it? I think that one has a less chance of happening than obviously Killian getting a start. But I
Yeah,
obviously
100%.
I think it's pretty fair to say that guys like Caleb Killian, Wicks, like you look at Braylon Marquez if he's healthy. These are all guys who are going to get time at the major league level this year. If the Cubs want to move it that quick, I
Yeah.
think it comes less of a can they do it, opposed to how much do they value the future in terms of development at the minor league level, and how confident are they that their major league coaching staff can develop talent? Because that was kind of the knock going to the last regime, right? The fact that they brought these guys up like your Schwarbers and your Baez, and those guys never really got better even when they got to the major leagues. They kind of plateaued, and they were great ball players. Don't get me wrong, but if you told me that was going to be Chris Bryant's ceiling, and it was great, don't get me wrong, after 2016 when he won the MVP, I would have been like, man, he didn't really balloon to the level that I thought he would.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking Chris Bryant being like Mike Trout level kind of talent at that time, or Javi Baez being like, man, like if you could just figure out how to lay off, outside breaking pitches,
to
like
lay off a
imagine
slider outside of the zone,
right? Like that's the level of major league development that they kind of missed on. And the same thing when it comes to like the pitchers that they brought up, other minus Kyle Hendricks, like all those guys that kind of really didn't stick.
Right.
You kind of had your Dylan Maples of the world that kind of came and went. They had so much talent and they just couldn't figure it out because once they were out of options back and forth, it was like you kind of had to keep them at the major league level. Right. And your bullpen was so depleted at that point anyway that like you just needed an arm in there that was, electric enough to you pray to God when you brought him in a jam, he was going to throw strikes. So I think like when you look at what's going on with this, it'll be an evaluation from Jed more or less of how confident he is at developing on the major league level. And if he feels like he's not as confident, I don't think you'll see as many guys come up. But I think that when they've been in their press conferences and kind of going over, this was a, kind of a point, like a bullet point that they wanted to improve on. And they might have done some moves to kind of bolster that a little bit. And I think that if they feel confident, they'll bring up some guys. But it's really interesting to see, like you talk about Triantos already at high A. Like, man, that
low
kid, low A.
He's at Myrtle Beach. Yeah.
My bad. That low A. Like you could see that kid go through the system pretty quick. I really do think so. I don't think we see him this year, but I do think that it'll be interesting to see where he ends up, by the end of the year. Because there's a wide array of where his talent can take him to, and if he truly learns and develops at the rate that he's already kind of, showing us, man, it's interesting to think like where he could end the season this year. So, but yeah, I'm with you. And I think that it's all about in-house development right now. That's exactly kind of where we need to be for the next couple of years. And
agreed. They're
doing a damn good job because, man, just to watch the flow of the guys that we considered high, it's now like you look at, Miguel Amaya and you look at Braylon Marquez, you're like, dude, like there's
Braylon
a
Marquez
realistic
is now number 10 in this
like
system.
there's a realistic and like there's a realistic like time or path where Braylon Marquez is everything we thought he is. He's just been hurt, and that's for him to be like 10th now, you're like, man, like a guy we were so high on just a year ago.
Yeah, it's like he's not an afterthought, but like
no,
he's completely moved in the standings.
He's a lefty who throws 100, like, and he's 10th in your system. Like that's the long and short of what we're looking at.
Yeah, it's nice, and like, and for reasons obviously, like we talked about a guy like Killian and all these names. And thank you, Tyler. What's up, buddy? How are you, sir? I hope you're doing well down in the old Kentucky. But like that is That is something that's going to be really exciting. And Juice, I think we can start to kind of pivot now. Oh, quickly. We do need to talk about one more guy. One more guy, just really quick. Cool ass story. Ethan Roberts, guy we've talked about being high on this show, making the Cubs opening day roster the way he found out today from David Ross. If you haven't seen it, I put up an article earlier about the event that transpired with a video and everything like that. It's super cool, but good for Ethan Roberts making the team. That's a guy I would love to see in the next 3 days, potentially for reasons that we'll disclose later. Like, I would love to see him in that opening series against Milwaukee. I think he's a kid that's going to provide a lot of value in the pen, and maybe he's one of these bullpen arms that becomes a very, not maybe dominant staple, but at least a staple at the back end to really get things going. So just a very cool thing for him. Juice, any quick thoughts on the Ethan Robertson area? Because you and I were talking about it before the show, so I want to give you your dues as well.
Yeah, man, 24 years old, and it's just a feather in the cap that if you miss bats in this league, it'll get you through the system quick, right? And this is what this kid does. He misses bats. And it's not like he's pitching in spring training and not going against like high level talent and competition. Like, I mean, he's been fantastic and good for, it's just a great story. And it kind of cements our whole thought on this, man. Like, let's get on to this next great team. Like, you watch him like all like teary-eyed in the dugout, and you watch him like after with the interviews talking about how like it's like 3 levels of frosting on the cake for him to make the team. And it's just like, man, like that's a kid to root for, like that's a future pillar potentially that you're looking at that like, man, like I hope one day he's pitching in the 8th or the 7th or who even knows, like the 9th, closing out playoff games. Like that's
playoffs.
That's the type of kid that we're watching right now, and that's even if the Cubs aren't good this year. Like, this is my PSA to all Cub fans. Even if they aren't good this year, make sure that we're finding little moments, right?
Moments
like
to celebrate.
Yeah, and like little moments to be like they are on the right track. They just need the time and the seasoning. Because I think that like it's what the Cubs are building is like a meal right now, right? It's like if you put like a brisket on the smoker, you have all the temperature. You have like the pellet smoker that you could throw it in. You have the recipe. Now it's just about waiting that 12 hours, to get that bark that on the outside of it and that, that tender meat to where like you're ready to slice into it, right? And then when you're ready to go to the playoffs and you're a contending team, you can add the sides. You can add like the roasted corn. You could add, the home fries with it or whatever you like to eat with your brisket or throw it on a sandwich. And those are the extra guys they'll bring in via trade, via signing. So we're at the point where we've preheated the smoker and we have like this awesome cut up piece of meat, right? And they're gonna throw it on the smoker, and now it's time to just watch. You know what I mean? Just watch it come together. So grab a beer and enjoy.
Juice, you're making me hungry, but I love that analogy.
I
but
know,
you made
great,
me. I want. I might have to get some brisket now when I'm in the city this week. But here's the numbers, man, on Ethan Roberts. 5 games of scoreless appearances. He's gone 5 1/3 innings, given up only 5 hits. He's only walked 1 batter, struck out 7. And I forgot to add, he also has a hold and a save in this spring training. He has been very good, and his numbers show it. He's effective. He's getting through innings. And like you said, it's not like he's just going up against small guys. Like, he's been pitching in some big moments in games where like Cubs starters were in the game. Like, that's encouraging. That's encouraging when the youth is coming. We've seen teams across the league like Kansas City and Cleveland and Oakland and St. Louis always be able to build the Rays, build these back end bullpens with these young guys because they can develop them in house. And if you don't have to pay for bullpen pitching, i.e., what we saw with Craig Kimbrell forever, you can build elsewhere and put your resources in other places. And that's so key. And like you said, it just is going to take time. But then you start to see the fruits of your labor, right? Like because in that 12 hours that you're smoking your brisket juice, you're also assembling your sides. You're making the potato salad. You're getting the cornbread ready. Like you're getting all those delicious sides that come with it at your favorite barbecue place. Like, and that's some of these little guys that are wins kind of popping up because they didn't take as long, but they were part of the process. Your Ethan Roberts of the world, potentially our Caleb Killians of the world. Like, there's a good chance here that there's going to be a lot of these little wins throughout the season that are really going to get us excited for that final product, that smoked brisket that's probably going to start paying dividends in 2023, if I had to guess. Sure, again, maybe they're not the World Series favorites in 23, but maybe they have a season where they win the NL Central and maybe win a round in the playoffs. And all of a sudden, everybody's like, oh, son of a bitch, this young Cubs team looks kind of good. It's possible. It's possible to have award-winning brisket if you're a home cooked juice. And I think the Cubs can really do that here with this opportunity of what they've been building up. And I think a good time that we can start to transition here to some of our kind of
Before we
predictions
start
and
eating a
thoughts.
mic, I'll say that. Before we
Yeah,
just start eating our mics, we'll have
I
to.
do. So bad. I want to eat so badly now. But here's something that Cubs fans can have an appetite for, and it's a great old comment from our boy Scott. Thanks for joining us, buddy. 22 games in April. If the Cubs go 10-12 or better, it's going to get exciting on the north side. I completely agree because if this team, this transition phase with some youth, some fresh faces that are going to bring some light to this team, especially early, if they're somewhat competitive through April, that's encouraging, especially if we start seeing guys like that come up like Killian. We've talked about it. Killian could come up and have like a Logan Webb type emergence like he did last year, where he became a very good dominant pitcher for San Francisco. Maybe he can be that guy this year that you insert as like almost like a trade deadline acquisition, right? We've seen it happen before in the past with teams like St. Louis and some of these teams that go on to win a World Series. They've had guys come up in the middle of the season that make a huge impact. It happens all the time. That's part of baseball. It's part of the development process. So, I think that is going to pose my next question, right? Scott's talking 10-12 or better in April. We want to talk NL Central standing predictions. And I think just we'll quickly ramble, you give some thoughts on your things, but rank them 5-1. Who's finishing last? Who's finishing first? Do you want me to go first, Juice?
Yeah, if you could, I just like,
Absolutely.
and I have them, but I want to hear your thoughts first.
Sure. Very easy one. I think the Pirates are probably last, or they're competing for fourth. Like it's going to be a tight race at the bottom, but I think the Pirates ultimately lose out probably because they deal more at the deadline than the Reds do. But the Reds are my 4, and they're offloading. Like, yeah, they still have Castillo. They still have some nice pieces. They're gonna offload some of those pieces probably at some point, but neither one of them are going to be very good. They're interchangeable to me at 4 and 5. I think confidently I can say just as close as the battle for 4 and 5 is going to be. I think 2 and 3 is going to be. I think the Cubs ultimately finish 3, and I think that's because maybe they do, like you said, kind of those strategic offloads that still are like beneficial because it gets new guys and young guys at bats and innings pitched and different things like that come late in the season. But I think the Cubs ultimately finish 3, but St. Louis isn't that far out of reach. And I think Milwaukee still finishes 1, but I just think this whole division's not going to be great this year. And a large part of that is because look at Milwaukee. They have 1 or 2 significant injuries to that starting rotation or that bullpen. They're kind of fucked, pardon my French. So that's kind of where I have it. 4 and 5 are probably interchangeable. 2 and 3 are going to be close, but I ultimately think that's your top 3. I think the Cubs are your third best team in the division this season.
Yeah, I think that if you're going to ask my prediction, I think that only one team is going to make the playoffs out of the Central.
Agreed.
And I think that it's going to be the Cardinals. And I think the Cubs are actually going to finish in second. I am not high on Milwaukee this year. And I struggle to think like where the run's going to come from for them. And they can only, like you said, they can only rely on that bullpen and that starter for so long.
Right.
And they just seem primed to be the team that deals with all these starting pitching injuries that we were kind of talking about. They kind of seem like that group that you wonder, how long can they continue to do this same kind of baseball? And Craig Counsell's a great manager. Don't get me wrong. As much as I hate him and I think he's corny as hell, I truly think that it's all or nothing on their pitching for them. And
Yeah.
they've given so much money to Christian Yelich to get the production that they've gotten out of him. And I think that in a lot of ways, he takes a step forward, and he probably has a better year than he had last year. But I think that he's a little less of a problem. I don't worry about him as much as I worry about like the Voodoo Cardinal Magic. I really don't. I think too, this first series will like really dictate how high I am on the Cubs. Because I think if they can go out and play 4 solid games against Milwaukee, maybe take 3 out of 4 against a really tough like group of starting pitchers that they're going to see.
Yeah.
That almost kind of gains the momentum for the year, right? It's like,
yeah, you start out
now
good,
you can
right?
start to like think, oh man, maybe, especially with a team like that with a bunch of question marks. Because if you're looking at the Cubs from an outside perspective, you don't know what you're getting out of a lot of players.
Right.
If they can get that early, confidence, it's almost like, hey, why not us? You know what I mean? Like, why not?
Yeah.
Like, why can't we hang around and win this division and get a role at the playoffs? I hope so. I think Scott kind of hit it on the head. 10 to 12 wins in April, and you're kind of sitting pretty. But with that said, I think that it all starts with that first series. Taking 3 out of 4, splitting would be great, right? You go in there and you get a good team
awesome.
like that.
I would be pumped to split with them.
Right.
Like,
maybe you get a good performance out of Steele and Stroh, and those are your 2 wins. You know what I mean? That's a distinct possibility that's how that works. I hope not, because we'll be at the game on Thursday, and I hope that they're bringing home a victory after. But I'm curious to see what kind of baseball they're going to play too. Going into no Brendan Davis yet. A lot of these guys are question marks in terms of what you're going to get. Like, play gritty style baseball. Like, that'd be fun, right? Like, it'd be fun if like every game they go out there and they laid it all out there, right? Because I feel like a lot of times, like the last regime kind of came in and like they played up to or they played down to their competition.
Right.
In a lot of series, it's like, man, like, be ready to play.
Yeah.
But with this team, I think it's almost like everyone's fighting for time.
For jobs.
Minus Wilson Contreras. Name one person out there that's not fighting for time.
Maybe Seiya.
Yeah, but I mean, even him,
right? Yeah.
I mean, you're trying to figure out where you're going to put him.
Right.
Like that's a lot of it too. So, I mean, it's interesting to think, other than those 2, I'll even give you Seiya at that point. Out of those 2 guys, like, you're looking at 26 more or 24 more dudes who they don't know how much they're going to play.
Right. Yeah. No,
I mean, just to round it off, I have the Cardinals winning the stupid division.
It is a stupid division because like no team is like elite. Like,
no,
there is
and
no
I think
Dodgers. There's no even like Braves or Phillies in this division. Like,
I mean, you could realistically say what number wins it? 87, 88 wins?
Maybe. I think you could have like a weird NL Central 07, 08 type, 88, 87, 86 game, 86 win team winning a division. If there is anyone in the NL, to me, it is the Central. It's not the East. I think you're going to probably have 3 90-win teams in the East this year. The Braves, probably the Phillies, maybe an outside shot at a team like the Nationals. I don't know. Like, there's teams there, and then obviously the NL West is the NL West. The Dodgers and the Giants are still going to be the 2 best teams in that division, but they're both probably going to win 90 games. So unless the Giants take a huge step back, so I agree with you, Juice. I think that's a great prediction for the Central. I actually don't hate it, so I'm intrigued to see what that ends up being. Come the end of the season and what happens there, but We'll take it to our league-wide prediction now, and this isn't necessarily like who's going to finish as everything in every division. We kind of already know, right? The Dodgers are going to win the West. We've talked about it, but we were talking about, you actually brought this point up, Juice, like something that we'll see around the league this year that might surprise people or that's going to be abnormally different or whatever. I know I kind of gave my one away earlier, which is like most pitchers in general used in a season. But I would love to hear what yours is. I have another one. It's not as like, oh, but like it's a fun one. So I'm gonna turn it over to you, man.
So I got 3.
Oh,
I think we're gonna
shoot your-
see one of the most deadline moves in the history of the league, because I think that there'll be a lot of teams that are in the contention to make the wild card, and they're going to
Like,
be
go
like,
for it.
"Hey, let's go for it." And I think there'll be a lot of teams that understand their place in baseball too, of like, "Hey, we're in it, but if we have an opportunity to trade a bat, a guy who doesn't fit for the future,
Yeah,
they're gonna jump at
they're
it." So I
gonna
think we're
do
gonna
it.
see a lot of movement. My second
I like that.
is I think that we're going to see the most amount of high end prospects called up earlier than we think that they should be, or in the past.
Mm,
I think a lot of teams are going to look at it as there's no benefit to keeping them down there anymore, so we might as well see if they can play.
hang
I
now, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the final one, I think we will see the most amount of pitcher injuries that we've ever seen in the history of
Yeah.
the season.
Yeah, that
I
scares me.
really do. And I think that the team that wins the World Series will be the one who can
The
navigate through all of
healthiest,
that.
yeah, just the healthiest
Yeah.
team. Like,
Mhm.
it's what it's and the deepest team, right? This is a season that, to me, really benefits a team like the Dodgers or maybe the Rays or Boston or, just these deeper organizations that and who knows, maybe that plays in the Cubs' favor in terms of, like you said, Juice, with maybe they sneak in and somehow get a wild card spot or win the division because the Cardinals and Brewers are just hurt. You know what I mean? Like, who knows? Who knows what happens? Um, I love that. So I shared mine earlier about most like pitchers used in a season. I think that's going to be a most. I also think it's not going to be the most, but I think we're going to see a lot more stolen bases than we have in historic seasons. And I know
I
I
hope
kind of
so.
touched
I
on this
missed
realistically.
that part of the
Yes,
ball
and
game,
like I think
right?
the bigger base is going to help. And I know people are going to be like, well, it's not like they're all going to swipe 60, 70 bags again. That's not what I'm saying. Guys throw harder and faster than ever, and catchers are, their pop time is better than it ever has been before. It's a lot harder to run than it used to be. But how many times do you see a guy run and he gets thrown out by an inch or two?
Mhm.
All the time. It happens all the time.
I
The
also
bigger
think too,
base
like,
is going to help limit some of that.
well, I think just to add to your point too, I think you've seen everybody stop running over the
Yeah,
course of that. Like,
100%.
I think there's a time where that flips. There's got to
Yeah,
be. You know what I mean? There's got to be a time where somebody evaluates the the probability of swiping the bag now,
yeah.
where they realize that, like,
Maybe there is
hey,
a
we're better off of
opportunity.
getting people in movement, in moving on the bases.
Or even more just
Because
hitting runs.
yeah, I mean, I truly think that too. I think that you'll see the Cubs do a lot of that. I mean,
Hell
if you
yeah.
look up and down this,
Hell yeah.
I think we'll see a lot of hit and run this year.
Yeah.
Because if you really look up and down the lineup, you could do it with almost everybody. There's not a lot of swing and miss.
No.
I mean, there's a lot of guys who put the bat on the
Just
ball,
put
and
the bat on the ball. Yeah.
I personally the Cubs should make a rule: if Nico Horner or Nick Madrigal are up there and there's a runner on, they should just
Hit and
automatically
run.
move them on every play. Like,
Yeah.
let's just like there's just not a lot of swing and miss.
No.
So why not? Open up some holes for those two guys who necessarily aren't power guys.
Right.
And I think you might as well just do it. I think the Cubs too are kind of with the house money kind of. They're playing with house money. Why not?
Yeah.
See what works.
See what happens, right?
It'll be interesting to see. I truly hope that part of the game comes back, because
I missed
that
the bag.
there's very few plays on a baseball field that are more exciting than a stolen base.
Yeah.
Think about it.
A home run, a play at the plate,
A double,
a double,
maybe
yeah.
a triple. I always said that a triple is the most exciting play in sports.
Yes, because usually it's a bang bang play at third.
Yeah, and it never really happens either.
Right.
I mean, think of a home run.
very
It's like it's over the wall and the guy's trotting. Yeah, it's exciting. Don't get me wrong, but
the immediate the height of the home run is the fucking crack off the bat.
Yeah.
And then
Right,
watching
and then-
it fly. Like, that's the
Right.
fun of it. But I agree. Dude, I love triples. And you know why? Like, I got spoiled, at least when I was younger, because like one of my all-time favorite baseball players is Carl Crawford. And like that dude was a triple machine for like the league standard. Like he there was like a year, I think he had like 19 triples or some stupid shit like that. Like he was putting up insane numbers and he would steal like 60 bags a year. Like he was an exciting player because it was those, like you said, those bang bang plays that are the exciting plays that make baseball fun.
Yeah, and I think too, like I don't know, I've mentioned this on a podcast before. All our listeners should go listen to Theo Epstein on Bill Simmons and talk about he gets on there. It's a 20-minute interview, says 20 to 30. He talks about things that would make baseball better. And it ranges from I know the other night, I think it was Grandal who had the wristlet and he was calling pitches from the wristlet that actually like the other starting pitcher or the pitcher will wear. And that way it kind of protects signs. So there's no sign stealing. You know, in the future, that's kind of like where this is kind of going, that there'll be like different punch-in codes that they can do for, starting pitchers or for the pitcher coming out of the bullpen to kind of cut off a lot of that, which is kind of cool. I think that's awesome. But one of the things that Theo Epstein mentioned on that podcast was making sure that there are more triples and doubles in baseball, because most of the time when you look at the three outcomes, yeah, home run's exciting, but it doesn't happen as much as like a walk or a strikeout, which are not exciting plays in baseball.
Right.
So the most exciting parts are, your right fielder rolling over to the ball and trying to throw out that guy at third. Mm-hmm. And the best part of like watching that guy going to third is watching the speed of him trying to get there. So the most exciting play is the what if, and baseball really doesn't have like the drawn out, like you see like a wide receiver break free, right, in the NFL, and like the excitement of always open, like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. That like,
that's the triple in baseball. Yes, you know what I mean? So you're right. The idea of like having those long drawn out plays is really interesting. And Theo Epstein even talked about like we should format parks to have more triples, to
hot take. That's why the Baltimore Orioles pushed their left field wall back,
which would be sweet. Like, and then there's Triples Alley and what's that? What's the name of where the Giants play?
Right?
Yeah. What's the name of whatever?
I don't know what it is now.
But
I think it's changed names like 3 times.
Yeah, I mean it was AT&T when I was.
Yeah, I don't think
kind of following all of that, but I know it's not that anymore. But I truly think that like those are the most exciting plays, stolen bases and triples to like round it all out. Baseball comes back if you do those things, and I think for the span of the Cubs, like getting things rolling and running, like that's only going to help them with a lineup that we really don't know what we're getting, right? Like moving the baseball, manufacturing runs, I think is like A+, top of the line,
baseball.
Yeah, and it's what David Ross should be preaching all day, because realistically, they're going to have to manufacture runs to win a lot of games. They don't have the power that they had when Rizzo and Bryant were all here.
And I think just quickly, I think you saw that last year a little bit in the early part of 2021. You saw them doing a lot more hit and run and stuff, but they just didn't have the personnel for it to work. But they tried it. They tried it a lot. Sometimes it really worked out and made a big difference. I think that's why the Cubs were so good to start last season. And then eventually the bats just got cold because they couldn't fit that style. Maybe that's a little bit of my tinfoil hat kind of take for the night. But like I really think that's a big thing. And maybe that's a huge reason why they've moved some of the guys that they've moved. So it could be really interesting. But Juice, Oracle Park, by the way, San Francisco.
There we go.
I looked it up for you. It's Oracle Park now.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. But you're speaking of all these different guys, right? It's going to be a lot of move the ball. There's still somebody that has to be a team MVP. So I think that's where we'll shift the conversation here. We've got about 5 more topics after this too that we're going to touch on as like season predictions. So we'll try to keep it a little more bang bang. But team MVP, I think, is a safe one. Could be a pitcher, could be a hitter. It doesn't matter. If you've got a reason for it, you feel it. You want me to go first?
No, I think Wilson Contreras.
Hit me with it. Okay.
I think Wilson Contreras has to be, if the Cubs are looking at, contending for a wild card spot or even the division, you're going to have to get 2017 pre-injury Wilson Contreras. Because you don't look, as you look at the lineup, there's just not enough guaranteed pop. And I think too, like you look up and down, you're like, where's the 40 home run guy? You know what I mean? Where's the 30, 40 home run guy? And that's fine. It's not there, but the closest you can get out of that is Wilson Contreras to me. Yeah. And I think too, like managing the pitching staff, especially with guys like Steele in it, and you don't know if you're going to get some of these younger guys that come up, but the bullpen will definitely be on the younger side / journeyman type. I
Yeah.
think that when we're looking at that, it'll be up to him to kind of manage the game, make sure he's spot on pitch calls, and kind of making sure that the Cubs are able to keep it low scoring. Because I think that's, if you're looking at what this Cubs team and how they win, it's play defense, have that lights out bullpen and win your 5-3 ball games, right?
Yeah.
Your 4-3s. That's
Yep.
that's how they're going to have to win this
Win your
year.
close games. Yeah, win your close games. They're not always going to be super high scoring games either. But I agree with you, Juice. I think Wilson's probably the answer that makes the most sense. I'm going to go a little off the board with my answer, and I have an explanation for why. And I think it could be Frank Schwindel. And I say that because the dude just keeps hitting in spring training. Like, people have a scouting report on him, and sure, again, it's spring training, and that's fine. And I'm not putting too much investment in it, but the dude keeps hitting. And like Marcus Stroman even made a comment, because like Stroman has been on record before on various podcasts and things like that. Like, he talks to elite hitters in the league. He gets that information. He absorbs that information and he puts it to good use. Why do you think he does the change with tempo shit? Because literally hitters have told him the only way you can screw with me is if you mess with my timing. That's why he does it. There's a reason why he does it, folks. And it doesn't always work, but it's pretty damn effective. It's helped him take his game to a different level. And he literally made a comment of how great of a hitter that Schwindel is, and he constantly asks him questions. To me, that is a key, because guys that he's listed before, Nick Castellanos, Jose Bautista, Edwin Encarnacion, elite hitters in the major leagues. I totally think Schwindel, if he stays healthy, and now with the DH, he doesn't have to play first as much. I know he is supposedly improved his defense, and I think it truly has. But like, that's a dude that between DH and first base with him and Alfonso Rivas this year, like, I think Schwindel's a guy that maybe he doesn't quite get you 30. He could probably drive in 100, though, just keeping the ball on the ground and spraying doubles. I mean, he's the closest thing we've seen to Nicky Two Bags, probably since Nicky Two Bags. And just in terms of like the approach he takes, right? He's okay with hitting it into the gap. It's not always going to be a home run, but he'll hit for average. I think Schwindel's not going to have the same power that Castellanos has, because I watched him muscle a ball out of a ballpark I'm very familiar with down there in Clearwater the other day and was very impressed. Schwarber did the same thing. He put one on the fucking highway. But I know where that highway is too. That's a long way. But like, I think Frank Schwindel's totally a guy that can be a 25 and 100 guy. Like, I totally think that's possible. Maybe he does give you a 30. Maybe the Cubs just aren't that hot and the ball's flying out of the yard in June, July, and August like it does at Wrigley with the wind blowing out. Maybe because there's lesser pitchers because of all the injuries, Schwindel's getting served fucking softballs down the middle of the plate all year, and he maybe hits 30. Who knows? But I really think Frank Schwindel's a guy that, I know he's a creative player and nobody believes that he's actually real, but this is a guy that could make real noise and potentially earn a team MVP, not a guy that kind of gets hot at the right time and maybe carries you into that last wild card spot this year on a whim. Again, yes, is it guaranteed? No, but like, this guy has shown he knows how to hit the fucking baseball. And if they're going to play a more hit style run game, maybe he's got Nick Madrigal or Nico Horner or, somebody that's got speed and potentially in front of him that can move and score base, because if he hits a double and you're on the run, you're scoring easily from first.
Right.
Maybe that's how the Cubs manufacture runs this year. It's not so many 30 and 100 guys, but you have a couple of 20 and 85 guys, and that's okay. I like runs. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't care how. I just ask how many at the end of the game.
The deep pass in football is the most exciting play, but you better believe I'll take a 1-yard fucking touchdown run from the goal line just as much as I'll take the deep pass. Like, at the end of the day, points are points, and I'll take runs however the fuck the Cubs can get them. So I got a little amped up with that one, but I like Frankie Schwindel, and he makes me excited. But we both took hitters as our team MVP, so I think it is acceptable now to actually perfectly shift to our next topic, which is top pitcher. And I think because we kind of look at this team, right, there's no real clear ace. I think Stroman's kind of like the quote-unquote easy answer out the gate based on his recent success. But you could argue that, like, kind of going into the season, at least for now, they're all starting at the same point to me, is Steele, Hendricks, and Stroman, because they're your top three, and that came out just the other day. I'll get to the reason why I'm about that, but that'll be my closing thought. But like I think these three all start on that same platform going into the season. So you could really argue any one of them being their top pitcher this year. So Juice, I want to give you the floor once again first. Who is your top pitcher candidate for this year? Maybe it's a bullpen guy too. And if you want to make a case for bullpen guy, I say go for it. But who is your guy that you really think could be that guy this year?
I think that we're looking at two predictions for it. I think the top is clear cut. It's going to be Stroh, and that's why I think when you ask this question, it's more or less who's going to be the number two. It's like, and I think by the end of it, we'll be looking at Justin Steele as our clear cut number two starter.
I like that,
and I really do. I think he has the stuff. I think he's got the makeup for the job. As we kind of, and I know friend of the show, I don't want to be, the guy who's, pumping up my guy, but I truly loved what I saw last year. And I've loved what I've seen this year so far. Yes. I think realistically, if you look up and down, at his game, what he's developing, he's got so many assets to the way he pitches a ball game that he's only going to get better as he takes the mound, in my opinion. And I truly think that I'm going to just to go up and down of, I think, Miley is somebody who I think we're really underestimating how good he can be. I think that when he's healthy and when he's on, he's a great pitcher. But the question then comes into the fourth and fifth. I love Kyle Hendricks, but I hate what I'm seeing from Kyle Hendricks to start this year. And I hope that he gets it together. I think he if I were to bet on anybody to get it together, it would be him. But, I just don't like what I'm seeing currently. And it kind of scares me because you don't know what you're getting out of this rotation minus Stroh, right? I mean, you know you're going to get a guy who competes every day in Marcus Stroman and gives you a good outing. And that's realistically, you want to be a playoff team, they need three. I don't care who they are. You need three every game that are going up there and giving you 6 solid innings. Yep. And they don't need to be shut out. They need to be 3-4, giving up 3 or 4. Hey, that's fine. You can win ball games, by giving up 3 or 4.
And if you're consistently giving up 2 and 3,
right,
you're in a good spot.
Yeah, you're in a good spot. But and I think too, if you're going to ask me a bullpen guy, it's our guy. It's our guy Afris. I absolutely love that kid. He throws funny. I love it. I love what I see out of him. He's got electric stuff. And I think that it's interesting to see how this is all going to pan out and who's gonna take that jump and take that closer job. Because I don't think there is one right now. I really don't. I don't think that there's a set one, and I don't think that David Ross has set that either. So figure it out. And I think that if I'm in a betting man, he's my bet. I truly think that he's the best bet to be closing games for the Cubs. And if he is, and he's elite, then hey, you could really start to piece together that bullpen with guys like Roberts. You're looking at some of these journeymen as they kind of go down the list. You're going to be able to find guys to fill in the 7th, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna have to play Russian roulette for the 7th. But if you can find an 8th inning guy and a 9th inning guy, then all you're asking your pitchers to do is go 5 or 6 because you can piece together from then.
Yep, I totally agree with you, man. And I agree. Top pitcher is probably going to be Stroh as long as injuries or anything like that don't derail it. I think that's going to be the case. I really do think Justin Steele is that guy that becomes the clear-cut number 2. I'm going to go a little off the board with my top pitcher candidate, and I'm going to say it could be Caleb Killian. And obviously his numbers are going to be lesser. He's obviously not going to pitch as much. I think in terms of impact, he's a guy that could come up, especially with injuries, middle of June, pretty honest, realistically, and maybe become a guy that's a staple every 5th day. Maybe he is that ready. There was word in camp that the Cubs thought he took that much of the strides that they were like, oh my God. Like there at least had to have been at least one day, even if it was the first 5 days of spring training where they said, maybe.
Be interesting.
Like, I think he's a guy, again, that comes up midseason and functions a lot like a trade deadline acquisition for, again, a team that's not actually competing but can compete this year. I think he's that kind of guy. I really do. I liked Killian since he's come over in the trade. That's been the guy that I tell people I'm the most excited about because he's the one that profiles like a true starter, top-of-the-line rotation. And maybe just because of his size and the way he's built, the way he looks, I'm not saying the way he throws or the way he pitches, but just like that big, tall, lanky, for some reason, I think Mark Pryor. like that kind of big, kind of taller, lanky guy that like
I could see it.
profiles as your like front of the rotation kind of guy. Like if he's truly healthy and performs to potential, like he could be that guy. We've gotten tastes of it of him in the minor leagues. Look what he did to cap off the season in the Arizona Fall League Championship game. He's the real fucking deal. And I think he can honestly come up and again, probably behind Stroh and like maybe neck and neck with a guy like Steele for a shorter period of time, have just as much of an impact on that starting rotation and maybe stabilize it late. Maybe that allows you to trade a guy like Drew Smiley or a guy like Wade Miley and get a legitimate prospect back that 2 to 3 years down the road might be useful to you as they continue to make this just well-cog-oiled machine that keeps on moving and producing talent from within. In terms of bullpen guy, I love the Efros pick. I think that's a total possibility. I think there's a number of guys. I mean, Jesse Chavez is making a hell of a case, at least for the early part of the season, to maybe be that guy. But I really think it could be Ethan Roberts, like actually making a chance. I really think that he could be that guy that maybe he doesn't become the ninth inning guy, and maybe they rotate that spot quite frequently throughout the year, and I think that's what they'll do. But maybe he's just a guy that you consistently see in like the high leverage situation, right? Like we saw it kind of with Justin Steele when he came out of the pen in 21. Hey, if it was a dirty sixth inning and the starter was gassed, you would see him in there. Sometimes we'd see him late in ball games, getting to the ninth with a lead or getting to the eighth with a lead in a jam. Like he was kind of the dirty innings guy that got out of everything. I think maybe Roberts, because of the kind of that chip on his shoulder he might have, maybe he functions into that kind of role where he's just a high leverage situation guy. It doesn't matter if it's the seventh or the ninth, but if it's high leverage, he's one of the first names out. I really think he's got that type of impact coming into this season. And I think that kind of transitions to, because I kind of picked two prospects, right? Kind of guys that are fringe. They're on
You did. I like that.
But I think we have to address what is the first prospect we see. And it could be a favorite prospect of ours, or maybe it's not. And I think we might have to add that question too, of who's your minor league guy that you're like ready to follow this season to like take that big stride. But I think outside of Davis and Killian, because I think we can confidently say those are the first two. You can take Killian if you want to. I know I've been on the Killian train already this episode. If you want to take him as your pick, feel free to. But I think Davis and Killian are the first two we see. Who do you have maybe as that next guy we see? That maybe it's this season, and maybe it's just in a bullpen capacity, like if it's a pitcher. But like, is there a guy that comes screaming to mind to you?
No, there's not, because I think after those two, it's almost like a wait and see, right? Because there's a lot of guys who need some seasoning down there. The only one I'll make like the argument that I think could maybe, if they take huge strides, would be Jordan Wicks. I think that like that would be the only one that if they are trading from the starting pitching, like you talked about, that if they're not in it, that would be a guy that'd be like, okay, why not? You know, at that point, like lefty, got good stuff, you know, like why not?
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I think that's certainly a guy. I feel like I can't go with this one because it also feels too easy. But Braylon Marquez, I think, is a guy that realistically we can keep in mind as again a bullpen arm, right? If he looks healthy and maybe by June or July he's a bullpen arm and he is that guy that can come in and maybe close games for you. Or maybe at worst he's a really good seventh inning guy. And like again, when you kind of need to preserve a lead and get to those later innings, maybe he's the type of guy. But I just have this very sneaking suspicion that it's going to be a race between these two, and they're both going to be bullpen guys because we've learned Ethan Roberts made the team. He was the Cubs' 30th ranked prospect. Well, it's a battle between the 28th and 29th ranked prospects, Juice, because I think it's going to be either Ben Leeper or Kane Euchert. We saw a lot of Kane Euchert in the spring training, and I think he looked very good. He was kind of in that Ethan Roberts conversation, I think, for a lot of people.
That's kind of, and that's another guy that, like, just when you're in the moment of answering that question, you're like,
you forget about.
You forget. And Leeper, too, if I'm not mistaken, he had gotten some time with the team. Did he not with the team last year?
I don't think he did. I think he got as high as AAA.
I swear I saw. Maybe it's just my mind playing tricks on myself, but
highest he got was AAA.
Okay,
AAA.
Then maybe I did watch a AAA game and I saw him pitch. That could have been a possibility too with the Marquee Network, which by all means is freaking awesome. The fact that a lot of games are on Marquee and you can watch
the minor league games too.
So
I love
But
minor league baseball. So sorry,
I do
continue,
too.
though, just.
But yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I think that those are two that they slip your mind, and Euchre I really really like, and I like what I saw this year. I thought more or less we were talking within the top, 15.
We were, but I had a show.
I mean, I could go down and you can go down and on an injury find Joe Schmo shortstop or third baseman because Pat Wisdom.
I think my guy though. I think the safe true pick to that. I just wanted to give these guys some love because I think they're worth like true prospects again.
Especially
guys
Euchre. Euchre's been. I'm surprised that they didn't give Euchre a slot.
Maybe,
I mean,
they haven't announced the roster.
They haven't announced the roster yet, but
so
I figured he'd be the Roberts kind of line too, where hey, you're making the team. You know what I mean? Like, but they could be going back and forth.
Yeah, and just to kind of add what you said about Leaper, right? Like he had a 1.26 ERA, 22 Ks to 4 walks in like 14 and a third innings at AA, and then he went up to AAA and was like almost like actually better. It was crazy, and he's a flamethrower, right? I think he can touch 100. Like they have these guys that are going to be fun, but I of the like top guys, I like the Wicks one, I really do. I think the next one, and it completely depends on health though, is Braylon Marquez. And I think he finally takes his true destination role, and I think that's to potentially become an elite closer. Like I hope that's right. Stuff. Like he's got the stuff.
Yes, wipeout slider.
Yeah,
good fastball.
Yeah,
I think I think while he does pitch 101 for a lot of it, he probably plays at 104, 103 for an inning more likely than. I mean, that's like the same. Isn't that the Aroldis Chapman?
Yeah, it's the same thing. They tried to get him to truly be a starter, and when he didn't, they were like, "All right, you're a closer." And then he became like one of the best closers in baseball
of all time. Right? But yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that just to kind of round that out, how great would it be if the end of the year, say they don't make the playoffs, but for a fact that Marcus Stroman is your 1, Justin Steele is your 2, Caleb Killian's your 3, and you have Marquez who comes up and is your closer. You have Robertson the 8th, and you got a guy like Euchre at the end of the 7th, and you're going into next year looking at some of these position players maybe close to making an impact in 23, 24.
Yeah.
You could look at the future of the Cubs and be like, man, they could realistically add another front of the line starting pitcher, which we talked about on the shows earlier on.
Right.
It's a good market next year for that. And you could look at 5 deep, maybe.
Right. Oh, yeah. No, 100%. You absolutely could. Like there's so much coming in. It's absolutely crazy. Just quickly, Juice. Who is your favorite prospect to follow this season? Who's that guy that's just you're itching to watch this year?
Ed Howard by a long. I want to see his bat.
Glove looks good.
I want to see his bat. I want to see him progress. I want to see him add power. I want him to get the Brennan Davis diet. And right, like he should go to Brennan Davis and go, dude, what did you eat? Like, I need to know
how many protein shakes did you drink every day?
And I want him to be. I want so badly for the kid from Chicago to be set at short.
Yes,
for the next 12 years,
or even at second, or at second.
But with that said, I love his story. Mm-hmm. I love the. He's baseball
from Chicago.
He's baseball Derrick Rose for us. That is what he is.
Or Io. Yeah.
Right. And it just makes so much more for him to root for. I'm a big fan of his. And I think that, like, man, you look up and down, like that glove is major league ready already.
Yeah.
Dude, figure out how to hit, man.
No, for sure.
Like, and he's not a bad hitter.
No,
he's not a bad hitter.
And you saw it last night.
To see some things.
Yeah, you saw it last night in that pick he made at second. The glove looks fine. The glove looks nice. They said when he was drafted that the glove was MLB ready. Like,
he's just so
good.
He's so smooth. You know what I mean? Like, you watch him, he makes plays.
He's peace move.
Yeah, like he makes plays that, like, in the future, man. Like, I know that like Nico Horner and Madrigal are here, but Howard to Triantos, man, would be. And I know Triantos,
like to Hernandez with Triantos at third.
Third, like, oh god,
dirty.
Like that, dude, just looking around that infield, like, find me a first baseman. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
put anybody there. Let Triantos play first just because you have nowhere to put him. Like
hypothetical move if the White Sox wanted Stroh, but they were going to give you Andrew Vaughn.
Ooh. No, I like Vaughn, but I don't like him. I don't like Vaughn that much.
Okay. I look at the future and I'm like, oh man,
I think it depends though. Again, I think it depends.
Right.
Like if this is Stroh going into the, they're out of it in 23 for some reason, or he doesn't seem like he's going to take his option to stay a third year, then yeah, maybe you do deal him at the deadline. But like, ask me in a year and a half, and then maybe I'll reconsider.
I'm just planting the seed, Ron. You know, a lot of times
I know
we get on this, and I'm like, there's a fit.
Yeah. This will fit later down the road. Super side note, Juice, just to touch on a point that you saw earlier about like this ramp up that we might see in the coming days. The Tigers just acquired outfielder Austin Meadows from the Rays, so there's movement happening, and this is where the bats. This is where we're going to see a lot of bats get moved. Teams are going to value keeping pitching. So it's coming, and I think tonight it starts, and we're just gonna have a chaos of shit happening between now and opening day, and I can't wait for it. I'm so excited. But mine is it's Triantos is up there, but like I'm excited to see Killian at the start of the season. Him and Triantos are the two. Like
that's your guy,
dude.
That's your guy.
Biggest Caleb Killian stan. Like I can't wait till he comes up and he signs that like John Lester contract to stay with the Cubs, and I'm just gonna. I don't care what number he wears. I'm gonna have a jersey. I know it's weird because he's younger than me, and I know people are like, it's weird when you buy a jersey of somebody younger than you. That's fine. I'll agree it's weird, but a couple of kids.
Let me be a kid. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
let me be a kid. You don't know how old I am. Shut up. Like, you know what I mean? You don't know how old I am. Let me be a child. All right. I don't get to be a child very much. Let me do it. But no, I think that's just my guy that I'm going to be following, especially at the start of the season. But Triantos. I hope he's in South Bend sooner than later because, like, I want to come out there with you and I want to see the Triantos to
see that guest bedroom right there. It
looks magical.
That's you. Hey,
as long as you got a clean spot on the floor, dude, I'll sleep wherever.
Ugg sheets. It's like sleeping in a pillow.
Now I'm gonna have
sleeping inside of a pillow.
I might be out in South Bend a lot sooner than you think. So,
be prepared. Anytime you're here, brother.
It'll be good. But with 3 more topics that we'll get to quickly here, and then we'll be able to wrap this thing up for everybody. Who's your biggest breakout player for this 2022 season?
I'm going to go full Cubs meatball homer bore.
Give it to me.
Brendan Davis.
Oh, yes.
He's going to – I'm talking like –
all the Brennan.
Like you'll be – I think by the end of it, you'll be asking, is this kid good enough to be mentioned in the top 10 players in baseball? I really do. I'm a little high on it because of what I've seen with his ability to hit opposite field bombs. Mm-hmm. Like if he has that approach, there's no pitching to him. And he realistically is the 5-tool player. Like he has so much going for him around the diamond too. This is a guy where if you want to give the Eloy Jimenez, Moncada, Luis Robert treatment, extend him now. You know what I mean? Like just give him 7 years now.
Would not be mad about that at all.
Because I truly think that like you'll be talking about Brendan Davis by the end of the year as the new face of the new Cubs. I really do. I think he has the ability to hit 290 and 20 bombs in a limited role for his first season. I really do. Because I look at I honestly too, I think he's too low on the top 100 in baseball. I really do. I don't think
feels criminally low, huh?
I don't think that he's gotten enough love. I really don't. And it's just a matter of like he does so much so well, and for him to be the age he is and to have the plate approach that he has, I think is like it's just not talked about enough.
Can I sprinkle something just like quickly onto your argument?
Please do.
Just remember, this is the same regime that found Mookie Betts in the 5th round.
Yeah, and he could realistically be that. Like that's the right. Like, isn't that cool to like? Like, I don't give him 10 years now. Like, I'm at that point where I'm like, just
10 years, 150 mil, and just call it a day.
that'd be a steal.
I know
At that point. Like, if he turns into that's, and I know this is a little homery. This is probably the most homer thing I'll say.
100%. I'm so here for it though, Juice.
And when if he hits 240, I'll be looking like an asshat. But hey, I'm the guy with the bucket hat. So you know what I mean? Like,
bucket hat.
I look at Brendan Davis and I'm like, God, I salivate at his bat. I salivate at the way he moves in the field. Like, when you watch guys like Luis Robert and you watch like Mike Trout, the way they move to baseballs and the way that they like get around the ballpark and how easy they make the game look, like Brendan Davis at times over this spring training did that. Like he made baseball look boring for him.
He made baseball look easy. Yeah.
Right. Like I look at his body type too, since putting all that weight on, and I'm like, why do you play baseball?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Linebacker, bro.
Right? Like, but I know it's meatballish. He's gonna have his ups and downs. It's what happens when you're a major league player. But he has every potential the next year of going in and being like the face of the Chicago Cubs. He absolutely has all of that.
That's a meatball take though that I'm so here for, G. So I'm glad you had to share that. I think my biggest breakout's another outfielder, and I think it's Clint Frazier, dude. I really do. And
I'd like to see that.
I think I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to be a 270, 30, 100 guy, but I think he's a guy that when you look back on this offseason, you could confidently like put him as the steal of the offseason. If Io Dosunmu, shout out to Bulls on Tap and Buzz, who had a great show earlier, and he gave us some love. Juice told everybody to come tune in with us. Hopefully everybody does. But like if Io Dosunmu is the steal of this past NBA draft, I think Clint Frazier can absolutely be the steal of this past offseason. The bat speed is there. It sounds like he's finally fully healthy, which I think is obviously a huge key. And again, the Cubs are all about letting guys be themselves when they're in other organizations that try to restrict their game.
Yep.
And maybe his is swag and health, but hey, if homeboy's growing a red flow and that beautiful beard that he's already working on here in spring training, like we're going to be vibing with Clint Frazier out in left field every day at Wrigley Field, and I'm excited about that. And I really think he can be the steal. So he's my biggest breakout guy. Like I think a very realistic season for him is like 260, maybe 22 bombs, and maybe like 75 RBIs. I think it's a very incredibly realistic season. And again, for a guy that cost you next to nothing to sign for 1 year, that's huge. Worst comes to worst, you lose him, but it proves your model works, or maybe he takes a bridge deal to try and stick around and you see him as a piece in the future. Who knows? It's going to be exciting to see. But that's my go-to guy. I think it's going to be Clint Frazier. Biggest flop. And I hate talking about this. It sucks. It's natural, though. There's always going to be somebody that's not going to – and it might just be a guy that doesn't meet expectation, right? It might not even be a bad thing, but just maybe a guy that's really hyped right now that you're like, he's just not going to be as good or whatever. Like, who's your quote-unquote biggest flop for this season? I think I know your answer, and I want to see if I'm right.
I think by mid-season we'll be talking about the end of the whole Patrick Wisdom experiment.
There it is. I knew it.
I almost grouped David Bodie in that too. I hate to say it, but if he can't stay healthy, there's just no point to seeing him. I mean, there's more guys that are on this team now that are fighting for time. Yeah. I think you can almost group both those guys in this. I think that there may be a team that takes on David Bodie, like you're needing a utility guy.
Fielder. Yeah.
But I don't think David Bodie or Patrick Wisdom end the year in a Cub uniform. I don't.
That's a hot take. That's a spicy take. That's not just a hot take. That's a spicy take.
And I loved what Pat Wisdom was for a little bit, as much as I dogged them all last year. But
I love when you short these guys' name like Al Pujols, Pat Wisdom. It just sounds so different.
It is, and it's like it's my snide at them, right? My little poke of the.
Oh my god!
And I hope I'm wrong. Hey, I hope he comes out and does wonders, and the Cubs make the playoffs. Yeah, but there's a reason why these guys like are picked up off a scrap heap, and David Bodie and Patrick Wisdom, like to me, they're the same kind of player almost. So they're going to fight for time. And I just don't, with how many guys that they could work around in that infield, I just don't see them getting enough regular playing time to get in a rhythm either. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's more guys I want to see than them two. And David Bodie, thank you for the memories. It was cool.
Thanks for
But
the memories.
right, but I truly I don't think we'll be talking about those two guys in any, same breath as we did over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. And I'm going to pivot away from hitters and I'm going to talk a pitcher. And I'm going to say biggest flop in the sense of like, it was a move that Cubs fans were like so in favor of when it happened. And I think just because of the weird nature of this season and how it's already getting off to a start, it's going to underwhelm people. And I hate to say it, but I think it's Wade Miley. I think he's just hurt. I think he's hurt. You
Yeah.
get to see the little glimpse of it, but like maybe he only gives you 40 innings this year. And like that
Yeah.
1 year super strategic claim for $10 million for a lefty inning eater in a year that when pitching is gonna be so important. Like I just think he's gonna be so hurt. I had this weird sneaking. It's already off to a bad start. He's already behind schedule.
Yeah.
Like
If that's the case too, you're almost looking at the Cubs being in like 4th or 5th, right? I mean,
yeah, arguably, unless some of these young kids kind of come out of the
right.
blue and can get you there, but like or like you get Adbert back and he's healthy and he's able to pitch again or something like that. But like he's a guy that at least until maybe a Killian or somebody like that comes up, that you just need to fill innings, bro. Just go out there and shove for
Mhm.
me for like 5 2/3 every day, and I'm good. But
Yep.
like and that
I
scares me
can
because
see that.
I want Wade Miley to be good because I want the Cubs to be able to strategically trade him at the deadline.
I do
And not a
too.
shot at him, but I think he's a perfect guy for any team that's a
Yeah.
contender. He's what a contender needs is an inning eater horse that can be like your third or fourth pitcher in a postseason. Like he's
Yep.
that guy for somebody. And
Yep.
if the Cubs can get something meaningful that looks toward the future and it gives Wade Miley a chance to compete in the present, I think it's a win-win for both teams. Wade Miley was going to be let go if he passed through fucking waivers. It wasn't going to matter. He was going to be able to sign anywhere anyway for probably less than $10 million bucks. The Cubs effectively guaranteed him $10 million this season. I love the mid-episode switch. For those that didn't know, Juice is wearing a bucket hat that those are listening. And
Rum
it's
Shada
reversible.
giveaway.
Yeah, and it's reversible. So it's red on one side, blue on another. So Juice has had it on red for most of the show. He just flipped it to blue for the very tail end, which I think is funny. But yeah, I just think the Wade Miley experience could be the biggest flop. I hope it's not, obviously. But I had this terrible sneaking suspicion that he doesn't pitch enough. Somebody still trades for him, but you don't get as big of a return as you probably could have. That helps for the future, and that's what's going to make me sad. I think it's just going to take away from him too, because like I really think he could have been the steal of the offseason just for a waiver claim for $10 million as a lefty inning eater. Yeah, sign me up. So I hope I'm wrong. I hope people clip this and like 6 months from now are spitting in my eye about it that he had a great season and they traded him mid-season or something like, or maybe helps the Cubs on a late playoff push. I don't know, whatever. I hope I'm wrong. Let's just put it at that. And last one, I think this is a good one to follow up on, and then we can talk about little personal goings, Juice, and elaborate on. You alluded to it a little bit earlier, but favorite storyline to follow this season. What is it for this team that like? I think there's going to be plenty that we as
A
fans
lot.
overall enjoy, right? Like there's going to be more than one for everybody, but like what's the one that garners the most of your attention this year? I guess is what I'm trying to hit at.
Yeah, I think if you're gonna ask me like broad picture, I'll do that. I'll do broad picture, and then I'll do like little bullet points that I'm interested in following. The broad picture and the broad strokes is I really am excited to see growth, no matter who they are coming up through the system, no matter if it's a guy that they've kind of put minimal amount of resources into that they brought into. I'm interested in that. And in terms of the fine strokes, it's it's Marcus Stroman's first year. I think that's how influential is he to the rest of the team? How the Cubs really haven't had like that guy like that who is that foot on the mound, right? Like if you look up and down like who they've had like over the course of a couple of years, it's been like John Lester, quiet, takes the ball. Like
Hendricks takes the
Hendricks,
ball.
quiet, takes the ball. Like
Probably since what, Big Z maybe?
yeah, and like Stroman is that like complete opposite. He's a showman, like he goes out there, he lays it all on the line, but he has fun and he promotes like a type of swag throughout a team, right? That if it's received and received correctly by young players, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to like see if any of that rubs off on like Justin Steele. You know what I mean? Or if any of that rubs
It's
off.
rubbed off on Ethan Roberts. Ethan
Right.
Roberts is a big Stro dude.
Yeah. Like it'll be interesting to see like baseball in general. And just to round it out on that point is so caught between, are we 1920s baseball, respect the game, or are we new age Twitter, Instagram, like for the likes, right? Like
Yeah.
baseball seems stuck in that. And as much as I enjoy 1920s, like, respect the game, have fun, I am ready to move into new era baseball of lay it on the line and, make sure that when you strike a guy out, you strut, or when you hit a home run, you pimp it. Like that's fun because that brings people to the park and in a sport that I think has a lot of downtime and needs things like that.
Yeah.
So to kind of just my storyline for the year will be, development and the amount of influence that guys like Stroman, guys like even Brendan Davis when he comes up, like how much influence they have on how quickly can we turn this thing into what this was in 2016. And that's the interesting part of it'll move as quickly as the development moves it.
Yes.
And that's what we're watching this year. We could look at this year as this year could be two things. It could be the calm before the 2015 storm, or it could be 2012, right? In a lot of ways, 2012 with Marcus Stroman. Like it's kind of how you're
with Matt Garza.
Right. That's what we're looking at. So that's my overall story and storyline for the team.
No, I like that. I like that a lot. I think, my favorite storyline to follow, obviously growth. I agree with you right there. I think that's number one. I think it's just going to be the emergence of Seiya Suzuki. I really think that's going to be the big one I follow. Obviously, Stro, I love seeing Stro. So, like, obviously that's appointment television for me. But I really think the evolution of Seiya Suzuki transition to the American game is going to be a lot of fun this year because we've seen some of the personality in him already. Like, he's a fun guy. I think as he starts to like pick up on the English language a little bit, like he's going to be good for some sound bites throughout the year. I think that's a guy that people are going to fall in love with. Like, remember when Kosuke, everybody had the headbands out in the bleachers? Do you remember that? Like, I think there's a total like Seiya fan club in right field. Like, that's totally going to happen by some point in the season. And I'm here for it. Because that, again, like you said, that's what makes baseball fun. And Cubs love guys with personality. That's why everybody loved Nick Castellanos. That's why everybody loved Starlin Castro when he was here. Rizzo, Javi. You go down the list of all these guys you love, it's because they had these personalities. And sure, maybe not everybody was that flamboyant Stro kind of guy, but everybody had their fun little thing that they were about. Yeah, like John Lester was this like big serious guy, but like he would joke every once in a while, and you would enjoy it when he did. Hendricks was the same way. Hamill was the same way. Lackey was just like he was kind of our version of big country, like the White Sox have Lance Lynn. Like he was that kind of guy to us. Travis Wood had a personality. Like they had those guys that people love. And they're starting to find some of those guys again, right? Like I think to an extent, like Frank Schwindel's kind of a little bit of that right now. Wilson's that guy. Stroh's that guy. I think you start to see Justin Steele come out and be that good old country boy that I think we're all going to adore and love. Oh, I can't wait till he's just like got a big chaw in his mouth on a June afternoon when he's pitching. It's gonna be awesome. But like there's gonna be those personalities that come out. And to me, the one that's gonna be most fascinating is Seiya. Because again, I talked about Schwindel being a guy that could be team MVP if he has a good year. Like Seiya is arguably probably the honorable mention that if maybe Joey was here would have been able to say with us. And we Joey kind of, let us know there probably is no chance that he'll be on tonight. So sadly, we won't get to talk to Joey, but we'll see Joey again on Thursday. We'll talk about that here in a second. But like Seiya Suzuki arguably is in that conversation too, is like, if that's a guy that gets hot and like has a good season, like maybe he's in the conversation as that team MVP guy because he's just the hottest bat, or maybe he looks a little bit like something like he did in Japan. You know what I mean? Like there is big time potential there. So I think that'll be my favorite storyline to follow. But Juice, speaking of storylines, as we start to wrap this show up, a good, beautiful, thick and juicy 90-minute episode. This episode's relevant if you're listening and you want to come back and listen again. I think this is relevant for probably the first couple weeks of the season, right? Like, and really throughout the whole season. This is a podcast we're probably going to reference back throughout the year. So if you listen this far, thank you first and foremost. But secondly, if you're listening in the immediate term, so if you're listening to this, we recorded this Monday night. It's going to go up tonight, but Tuesday, Wednesday, even Thursday, maybe that's how you start your morning off to welcome an opening day. And if that's how you join us, thank you so much for doing that. Because we want to set the mood for you. And we hopefully can set the mood for you on Thursday because we're going to be in attendance. Juice is going to be there. I'm going to be there. Joey's going to be there. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have 3/4 of the Cubs on Tap panel. Unfortunately, it sounds like Joe's not going to be able to join us. Not everybody's job is as forgiving, which I understand. But we're going to have a good time. We're going to bring a ton of content. And then Ron's going on the bender that I kind of promised everybody because I'm going to games on Friday and Saturday because I have to be in attendance for Stroman's first start. And I thought it was going to be Friday. That's why I bought the tickets. And then David Ross pulled the quick one, a metaphorical curveball on me and threw Justin Steele in there, number 2. Love getting to see Steele live because I haven't seen him pitch live since he was probably out of the pen. I'm excited to see him start on Friday, but I gotta be there for Stro on Saturday. Absolutely have to be. So I'm going on a weekend bender. Juice is in charge until I get back. I'm gonna use my best Theo Epstein impression here, but I mean it's gonna be a lot of fun, dude. I know I'm excited. We're gonna do a ton of content, plenty of #Crack'em celebration will be ensuing. It's gonna be cold as shit though, and potentially raining. So like.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun. We're still going to make the most of it.
Beer jackets.
We're still going to make the most of it. It's going to be a good time, but it'll be interesting to say the least. It'll be fun. I'm excited either way. I don't give a shit. As long as it's not torrentially downpouring, I'll live. Just give me a light sprinkle and I'll survive. You know what I mean? We'll be in the bars. We'll be hanging out. And if you are a listener and you are going to opening day and you happen to find out where we are, come say hi. We'll buy you a beer. Come hang out with us. We want to get to know the people.
I told everybody 10 a.m., right?
Yes.
10 a.m. if they're there.
We'll be at Murphy's. We'll be at Murphy's
right
out the gate. I mean, I'm
damn right we will.
The first move, Juice, that I am making on Wednesday evening when I get into the city. I got to go to work first, but then after work, there's a Walmart kind of sort of near where I'm going to be. Pedialyte is in my future because that might be the sponsor of this.
That'll be a must.
Bender this weekend. It's going to be bad. It's literally going to be 4 days of just enjoying the North Side for the North Side. And it's going to be a great time, but I'm excited for it. I know you are too, man. So I want to quickly turn it back over to you. Any quick final thoughts before we wrap up the season preview?
The quickest of final thoughts. Last podcast, I said Al Pujols. Just FYI, it broke. He divorced his wife of 22 years. So I am going to mention Al Pujols on this podcast until Al Pujols' life is in shambles, like absolute shambles. Like I'm talking like,
oh no,
like begging for change on the corner. Like that's where I'll end this. Like if he's outside on Belmont there on the corner when you're going underneath the bridge, right before on the way to Wrigley Field, and the Cardinals are in town, he's like, I'm Albert Pujols, former Cardinal great. I'll throw a penny in his cup and say, yeah, I know you are. Thanks, Al. Have a good one. And that'll be it.
It's so dark, but it's so funny. I love that, Juice. What an incredible final thought. And obviously, as everybody knows, Juice always says, fuck the terrible city of St. Louis. So, yeah, man, no, I think my only final thought, I'm excited for this weekend. Again, we got 3 incredible days of Cubs on Tap coverage coming, with obviously opening day being quite an adventure with all of us being there. I can't wait for that. But stick around with us all season. We're going to have content. It might not be in the form of a live show every single day, but we're still going to bring you content every day. We're going to interact on Twitter as much as we humanly can. And it's going to be a fun baseball season. And like Juice has said before in this, let's just enjoy the ride. It's going to be a good time. It's a roller coaster ride. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And we're going to be here for the whole season. And it's going to be a blast to cover the team again this year because there's optimism. There's hope. It's a different time in Cubs history. And I think we're all excited about that. But before we get going, Juice, I do want to remind everybody Cubs on Tap is the official Cubs podcast of the On Tap Sports Network. You can go and check out all of our great work over at www.ontapsportsnet.com and at OnTapSportsNet on social media. You can follow the pod specific account. We are on Twitter and Instagram. We are at Cubbies. That's Cubbies on tap. Make sure to follow us there. In addition, I am at Loose on Tap on Twitter. Juice is at Juice on Tap on Twitter. Joey is at Joey Knows Nothing because the IN stands for Win Baby because he's over doing on tap bets as well. And make sure you also follow our boy Joe Maris. He is at Joe on Tap and all the other great writers and contributors for our Cubs coverage here at On Tap Sports Network. We don't only have Cubs though. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, we got all of that. And yes, Cubs fans, we all know one of our friends that likes the Southsiders. We have pretty good coverage. And our boys over at Sox on Tap do a good job with that as well. So be sure to send them our way. We mentioned bets. You mentioned golf, Juice. We've got golf coverage. We've got it all here. If you like sports and you like Chicago sports, we've got it for you at On Tap. So once again, www.ontapsportsnet.com, at On Tap Sportsnet on social media, the On Tap Sports Network. Go ahead and check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. And for our gambling friends, if you don't already have an account with BetRivers and you'd like to sign up, you can sign up mobily again. It's now a thing again here in the state of Illinois. Be sure to sign up with our friends over at BetRivers and use the promo code ONTAP. That will give you up to a $250 deposit match on whatever you deposit into your account for the first time. It's free money. It's free $250. Take it and run with it. I did. I hope you do too. And go win some money with our friends over at BetRivers. So once again, ONTAP is your promo code. The On Tap Sports Network. Go ahead and check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. Juice, this was fun. This was a beauty of a 96-minute episode. We got into a lot of stuff. The next time everybody hears from us, it's going to be opening day. My friend, always a pleasure. And what do you say? We get out of here the only way we know how to, my friend?
Fuck the Cardinals.
And let's go Cubbies.